Shalom and good morning all. We continue our Genesis to Revelation studies. Today we are starting a new book, 2 Samuel, reading chapters 1 to 5. Now there is nothing of significance regarding eternal salvation, commandment keeping, or consequences of not keeping in these chapters, but you ought to read or listen to them for completeness and other matters regarding the history of the congregation of Israel and its leadership, now under David, or soon to be under David. More importantly, to see for yourself if there is any change in what God requires and what pleases Him, so that when we come to reading 1 John chapters 3:22, it says, "And whatsoever we ask, we receive of Him, because we keep His commandments and do those things that are pleasing in His sight." So when we come to that, we would know, having read the Bible completely, if there's anything that's been changed in what God required of us, and to what specific instructions He gave about making any changes to what He told us to do or not to do. It also makes entertaining reading these chapters. Now I have made a few of my observations below that may go overlooked. So chapter 1, a summary, is King Saul and son Jonathan and all his sons actually die in battle, and David's response to that. David saw the importance of the people of God knowing how to fight to defend themselves and not leave it purely to God's supernatural intervention. In other words, with the faith that God will assist us if we please Him, that we also add the works. Maybe some of this should be employed today when dealing with those who are against seekers of God and those of His kingdom. In other words, the ones who don't like Christians or the Jews. Psalms 18:34 says, "He teacheth my hands to war, so that a bow of steel is broken by my arms." Psalms 144 verse 1 says, "Blessed be Yahweh my strength, which teacheth my hands to war and my fingers to fight. My goodness, my fortress, my high tower, and my deliverer, my shield, and He in whom I trust, who subdueth my people under me." So in other words, many believers think that Christians are not to fight, but clearly we are to fight and know how to fight. Even Abraham took his 318 trained men when it came to rescuing Lot. Verse 17, "And David lamented with his lamentation over Saul and over Jonathan his son. Also he bade them teach the children of Judah to use the bow. Behold, it is written in the book of Yasha." Coming on to chapter 2, a summary. David is anointed king over Judah. Note his men take their household, which inclusive the non-Hebrew servants, wherever they go, so that they also become keepers of God's law and inhabitants of the nation. Isabeth made king over Israel. That is one of Saul's sons. He made a king over Israel, whilst David is making over Judah. Now there is now an established division between Israel and Judah. The two trees, the two sticks, as they will become to be known in prophecies, and even in Romans. Yes. Coming on to chapter 2, verse 1, it reads, "And it came to pass after this that David inquired of Yahweh, saying, Shall I go up into any of the cities of Judah? And Yahweh said unto him, Go up. And David said, Whither shall I go up? And he said, Unto Hebron. So David went up there, and his two wives also, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess, and Abigail Nabal's wife, the Carmelitess. And his men that were with him did David bring up, every man with his household, and they dwelt in the cities of Hebron. And the men of Judah came, and there they anointed David over the house of Judah. And they told David, saying, that the men of Jabesh Gilead were there that buried Saul. But Abner, the son of Ner, captain of Saul's host, took Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, and brought him over to Mahanaim, and made him king over Gilead, and over the Asherites, and over Jezreel, and over Ephraim, and over Benjamin, and over all Israel. Ishbosheth, Saul's son, was 40 years old when he began to reign over Israel, and reigned 2 years. But the house of Judah followed David, and the time that David was king in Hebron over the house of Judah was 7 years and 6 months. Coming on to chapter 3, which deals with Abner of Israel, joins David. So the same Abner who was Saul's protector, let's say bodyguard, and who made Ishbosheth king over Israel, he now joins David of Judah. Reading from verse 1. Now there was a long war between the house of Saul and the house of David, but David waxed stronger and stronger, and the house of Saul waxed weaker and weaker. And unto David were sons born in Hebron, and his first was Amnon, and Ahinoam the Jezreelitess, of Ahinoam the Jezreelitess, and his second Chelib of Abigail, the wife of Nabal the Carmelite, and the third Absalom. We need to remember Absalom, the son of Maacah, the daughter of Talmai, king of Gashur, and the fourth Adonijah. Again, this is two names, remember, Absalom and Adonijah, the son of Haggith, and the fifth Shephatiah, the son of Abital, and the sixth Ithream by Eglah, David's wife. These were born to David in Hebron. And it came to pass, while there was war between the house of Saul and the house of David, that Abner made himself strong for the house of Saul. And Saul had a concubine whose name was Rizpah, and the daughter of Aiah. And Ishbosheth said to Abner, Wherefore hast thou gone in unto my father's concubine? Then was Abner very angry for the words of Ishbosheth, and said, Am I a dog's head which against Judah do show kindness this day unto the house of Saul thy father, to his brethren, and to his friends, and have not delivered thee into the hand of David, that thou chargest me today with a fault concerning this woman? So do God to Abner, and more also, except as Yahweh hath sworn to David, even so I do to him, to translate the kingdom from the house of Saul, and to set up the throne of David over Israel and over Judah, from Dan even to Beersheba. Continuing from verse 18. Now then do it, for Yahweh hath spoken of David, saying, By the hand of my servant David will I save my people Israel out of the hand of the Philistines, and out of hand of all their enemies. If you read the gaps I've left out, you follow the story, how David becomes king over both Israel and Judah. I'm reading from chapter 4, verse 10. When one told me, saying, Behold, Saul is dead, thinking to have brought good tidings, I told hold of him and slew him in Ziklag, who thought that I would have given him a reward for this tidings. How much more when wicked men have slain a righteous person in his own house upon his bed, shall I not therefore now require his blood of your hands and take you away from the earth? So this is David speaking to some men who killed, I can't remember who was in his bed. And David was saying, repeating something when he heard of how Saul and his son Saul got killed. Someone came and said that he killed King Saul and found the ring and the crown, approached to David, and David killed him for saying that he killed Saul. So David saying, if I killed that person, would I not also kill these men who killed someone innocently in their bed? But I said, read the story or listen to it, you know the background. I'm going to go on to chapter 5, reading from verse 1. This is how David becomes anointed king over Israel. Verse 1. Then came all the tribes of Israel to David unto Hebron, and spake, saying, Behold, we are thy bone and thy flesh. Also in time past, when Saul was king over us, thou was he that led us out and brought us in Israel. And Yahweh said to thee, Thou shalt feed my people Israel, and thou shalt be a captain over Israel. So all the elders of Israel came to the king of Hebron, and King David made a league with them in Hebron before Yahweh, and said, Anointed David, and they anointed David king over Israel. David was 30 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 40 years. In Hebron he reigned over months, and in Jerusalem he reigned 33 years over all Israel and Judah. Verse 10. And David went on and grew great, and Yahweh God of hosts was with him. Verse 12. And David perceived that Yahweh had established him king over Israel, and that he had exalted his kingdom for his people Israel's sake. And David took him more concubines and wives out of Jerusalem after he was come from Hebron, and there were yet sons and daughters born to David. And these be the names of those that were born unto him in Jerusalem: Shammua and Shobab and Nathan and Solomon. Verse 17, which David goes to war and defeats the Philistines. But when the Philistines heard that they had anointed David king over Israel, all the Philistines came up to seek David, and David heard of it and went down to the hold. Verse 18, the Philistines also came and spread themselves in the valley of Rephaim, and David inquired of Yahweh, saying, Shall I go up to the Philistines? Wilt thou deliver them into my hand? And Yahweh said unto David, Go up, for I will doubtless deliver the Philistines into thy hand. And David came to Baal Perazim, and David smote them there, and said, Yahweh hath spoken forth upon my enemies before me as the breach of waters. Therefore he called the name of that place Baal Perazim, and there they left their images, and David and his men burned them. Verse 25, and David did so as Yahweh had commanded him, and smote the Philistines from Geba until thou come to Gaza. So again we see David seeks his direction from God, obeys and destroys the images of the Philistines' false gods. We are now at two kingdoms on each side of the river, being under one leadership, King David. Of his children, they will be part of the future episodes, as I said, Absalom and Adonijah and Solomon. Shalom, until tomorrow, God willing.